Yeti's SB130 brings, of course, 130 millimeters of rear travel to the table, a number that can be deceptive, especially when you notice the reduced offset Fox 36 fork hanging off the front of the bike, set to 150 millimeters. Between that and the bike's extra modern long slack geometry, our Southwest Utah test site proved this bike might become
one of my favorite, maybe not my favorite, but one of my favorite long travel bikes here.
Mike, it's a short travel bike. It's 130 millimeters of rear wheel travel.
Yeah. It's an awesome long travel bike.
I know, like, it doesn't feel like a short travel bike at all. It's only 130 millimeters of travel, but damn, this bike likes to brawl.
It does. In fact, I rode it we had our 2 courses. We had our XC course, and then we had our bigger course for the bigger bikes. And I rode it at the XC course, and it was good, but I wanted to see how it performed at the other course. And I got my fastest lap out of all those bikes that I tested on this bike.
Yeah. So, like, I don't know, I felt when I first got out on it, I felt like it was so efficient at pedaling that I didn't think it was gonna like descend as well as it actually did. I mean, it's like, it's a supple suspension. It's like, I feel like it's a very advanced feeling suspension where you can give it a ton of gas. It just kind of floats over everything.
Yeah, it's amazing suspension.
And like, you put power down and it just drives forward.
Which I feel like that's a very Yeti characteristic. A lot of the Yeti bikes that we've ridden, they have bikes that really absorb, you know, whether we're looking at 100 millimeters of travel or 150, and yet when you need that efficiency, it's right there.
Yeah.
But then, like, so that's where it kind of gets tricky though, right? Like, you got this really efficient, effective suspension that it pedals really well, and the bike climbs really well, but then it's new school, like, bleeding edge, aggressive, slack front, steep seat angle, like a 77-degree seat angle, 65.5-degree head angle, 48-plus-inch wheelbase, 130 millimeter on a large, 480 millimeter reach on a large. This is a 130 mil travel bike that we put in with all of our short travel stuff, and it works really well. Like, it does. I put my fastest time on the cross country lap on this bike.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there were times where it felt like, wow, this just doesn't really even want to go around this corner. It's almost insulted by, by anything slow or tight. It just, the faster you go, the smoother it gets, the better it handles, and the more happy it is.
Yeah.
And as a smaller rider, I felt like those were aspects that I struggled with a little bit more than taller or broader riders. Well, I mean, indirectly.
Fat jokes, goddamn.
But I felt at times a little bit overwhelmed by the super slack head tube. And again, I think that's just something, if you have a little bit more mass or if you're on a smaller version, those issues are mitigated. And again, I don't know that it was a little bit harder for me to pick my way up over technical stuff. So if you're in an area that has a lot of ledgy climbs or a lot of very tight corners like you can find in the East Coast.
Really tight switchbacks.
Really tight switchbacks, maybe there are better options, but if you're in areas where you do have long runs, where you can just let it out, where you have big sweeping corners, where you do have a lot of very consistent climbing, I mean, this bike really did do all of that very well.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was one of, if not the best, at like the ledgy step-up stuff, because it was such an efficient pedaler.
Yeah.
And it just like, when you get on the gas, it goes, and you're like, oh, like, and it doesn't get hung up. It's a bigger, you know, it's a 29-inch wheel, so it doesn't get hung up as much. And I had zero problems, like, just getting up all that stuff.
less travel and the ever-efficient Switch Infinity made the SB130 one of the best all-around climbers we had this year. But its contemporary geometry demands a different style riding that could be too much for some.
But I feel we're sort of like at peak geometry right now, where everyone's kind of gone in this direction, and you're finding a few brands are starting to hold back a little bit in terms of head angle or fork offset, and they're keeping their wheelbases a little more constrained so that they will work in a wider variety of terrain.
Yeah.
And this feels very much like just a sort of a Western bike. Like it's burrow down, whole enchilada, kind of just haul ass and don't care.
Yeah, it's carvy. It's not like a super nimble little like fast steering.
It doesn't
bike.
even pretend to be.
Yeah, it doesn't want to be. It's not trying to be.
Right. So either you adapt to the new school of riding and you'll love it, or you may live somewhere that's nadgery or technical, or you might like more trialsy type of riding, and then you may be challenged a bit by it.
Yeah, and you know, it does take some getting used to. You know, if this is a bike that you're interested in, you want to like get into that new school geo stuff. It's like you need to be over the bars. You need to be aggressive. If you fall asleep at the wheel on this bike, it's going to ping you for it. Like,
or just go straight.
If you're sitting back just on the saddle steering around, like it's going to push through corners and understeer, because you need to be over the thing in order to get it to move around. You know, and that's good. I think that's really good for like aggressive riding.
Like
it's not a little noodler though. Like it's you know.
It's one of my favorite long travel bikes here. That's also
in the short travel category.
But that's also what I'm finding is happening across the board too. There's all these really good suspensions now and these really progressive geometries, and where maybe a couple years ago I would have wanted a 150 or 160 mil travel bike, I'm really happy now with the 130 mil travel bike and what it can do.
Yeah, and
this is that good a suspension that it can do stuff that a couple of years ago there weren't really 150 travel bikes that felt anywhere near this good.
I definitely didn't feel any point on this bike where the bike's suspension got overwhelmed by what we were riding.
No.
And we were riding some really chattery, very ledgy, very hard edge stuff.
Yeah.
A very small detail, but again, when you're looking at bikes like this, it's all about the small details. Yeti put water bottle bosses inside the triangle, which again, you can tell it's a Colorado company. We have so many 2 to 3 hour rides very close to us, and you can get away with having a water bottle on you and one in the bike. And it's a small detail that I would appreciate on almost every single ride.
Yeah, it's nice to get the monkey off your back a little bit, you know?
What do you think of suspension component balance, front to rear? Like it's a 150 millimeter fork, in this case, it's 36 with a Fit 4 damper. 150 mil up front, 130 in back. Does that seem appropriate for what this bike is?
Well, it's funny because, you know, a lot of the times you would think with that much difference in travel between front and rear, like it'd feel unbalanced or something, but it feels fitting because I think this particular 130 mil bike feels like more travel.
When you combine that with the aggressive geometry the SB130 has, you really get a bike that feels fast and capable beyond what the travel number suggests. Whether you're ready for it or not, the SB130 will squeeze every bit of speed out of your daily rides. Check out the full review and the rest of the Bible videos at bikemag.com.